So hey everyone, welcome to the part 2 of this complete TypeScript course. Alright, so in the last video we had built a simple application using all the TypeScript features that we have available. Okay, so we just created a simple to-do app where we can just drag and drop from in progress to the finished to-dos. Okay, however we have a very big file over here. Okay, so it is about around 400 lines of code, where now we just need to split this into its own particular function so that we do not have a complete mess within this one particular file. Okay, so we just want to split this into modular code. Okay, so each particular function will have its own file and we can just import and export within that particular files. Okay, and we can just exchange code between files. So there are two ways of doing this. One is by using the TypeScript namespaces and modules, which is only specific to TypeScript and not for JavaScript. And there's one more way of splitting our code, that is using import and export syntax, which is supported by both JavaScript and TypeScript as well. Okay, so I'm just going to show you both the ways. Okay, so of course nobody in these days uses namespaces and modules, so I'll still be showing you how exactly we can use the syntax of the TypeScript using namespaces and modules. Okay, so that we can split our code into multiple files. Okay, so if you want to watch this section of namespaces, you can just skip ahead. Okay, so you will also be provided by timestamps within the video. Okay, so you can also just follow the normal import and export syntax, just because if you are more curious about how TypeScript manages import and export between TypeScript files, you can just watch this part. So I'll not be doing for all the particular feature that we have into its own file. So I'll just do one and show for this particular section for the namespaces and modules. So what I'll just do is I'll take this two pieces of code. One is for the enum type of the to-do and the to-do class itself, okay, which defines the type of the to-do. So basically this is the to-do model, right, which will define all the properties and types that a to-do must have. So I'll just cut this and create another file next to this app.ts, and let's call it to-do model.ts. okay, so this need not have to be a capital T. Okay, so inside this we need to use a special keyword that is only taken up by TypeScript, that is namespace. Okay, so namespace, and we can just give this a name, let's say to-do model. Okay, so inside this we are going to paste in our code. However, this is only accessible only within this particular file, okay, and not from any other file. So how do I export from this file and import within my app.ts? So for that I can use the export keyword. So whatever the type we want to export, okay, so we are exporting the enum type as well as this to-do model, right? So let's put an export there as well. So this is only available within this file. So how do we come to the app.ts and then import within this file? Okay, so there is a special syntax which is only supported by TypeScript and not JavaScript. Okay, so we just need to go to the top of the file and we just need to use 3 slashes. Okay, so this is not a comment. Okay, so although it looks like a comment, so 3 slashes is a special syntax that is picked up by TypeScript within .ts files, and here we just need to use a special XML syntax, that is, okay, so this is a special XML syntax, and here we just need to say reference and then pass in a path and set that equal to the path where the to-do model is existing. Okay, so that is we can say to-do model.ts. Okay, so you see that this is not a comment but actual code that is picked up by TypeScript, and this doesn't do it all. If you see, we still have TypeScript errors over here. Okay, so for this we just need to use the same namespace within this file as well, okay, along with the to-do model. Okay, so whatever the name we have given here, so we can just call this app. Okay, so since we are using it even within this file for all the particular piece of code within this, so we can use the same namespace and we can wrap our code completely inside that. Okay, so I can just use namespace and then say app. Okay, and within this block of code we can just wrap our entire application inside that. Okay, like this. So now all the TypeScript errors are gone, so which means that these particular types that I exported within this file are available within our app.ts. Okay, so let's recompile our code and just test this out. So now if I add a to-do, So it's giving me an error now. If I click on add to do, it's giving me an error saying that it cannot read properties of undefined reading in progress. So this is exactly the the model that we exported as enum, right? So the in progress enum, okay, so that's what is not been able to find, even though TypeScript doesn't give us any errors within this file. Okay, so for that we just need to understand what is going behind the scenes. So once our file gets compiled to normal JavaScript, so as I told you in the last video that we have this dist folder, so along with the app.js we also have this to do model.js. okay, so this doesn't use any kind of import export syntax, that is only supported by JavaScript. okay, so this normal JavaScript file doesn't understand what is namespaces and modules, so we haven't explicitly like told JavaScript that we need to have a connection between the to do model and app.js. okay, so where we need to import this to do model inside this app.js. okay, so if you see within this code we are nowhere using the to do model, right? So how can we do this? So we just need to go to the tsconfig.json. so we need to enable the property called out file. okay, so let us search for that. So out file, and we just need to comment this in, and we just need to specify a particular file where all of our code is compiled in just one file. okay, so we can just call that bundle.js. so we can put that in the dist folder saying dist/bundle.js, and once I save this, so this is giving me some error here. So this is only supported by AMD and system modules. okay, so within this out file, so what we just need to do is we just need to go at the top, and we have this module here, right? So we just need to change this to AMD, okay, like this. And once we save this, we now need to go to our index.html and give that root folder, okay, where it has to fetch that. So you see that we already have a bundle.js over here. okay, so here it contains all the code including the to do model as well as the app.js. so we can just give a pointer to the bundle.js instead of the app. so let's change this to bundle. okay, so once I save this, so let's give this a test. okay, so adding a sample title, description and number of hours, so that works all right, and also the drag and drop features also working as expected. okay, so this is all about namespaces and modules. so I just don't want to go deep into this, since we are no more going to use this kind of feature within our development process. So we only use the import and export syntax, which I am going to show you right now. So let me introduce you to the import and export syntax that is supported by both TypeScript and JavaScript as well. okay, so far we have seen an approach where we use the namespaces and modules. okay, so during these days nobody uses that much, so we always stick to the import and export syntax supported by both TypeScript and JavaScript. So what I can just do is I can just get rid of this reference and also this namespace that I'm using in both of these files. okay, and also let's get rid of this closing bracket here, and also let's do the same for the to do model itself by deleting this braces. And this export keyword is both supported by TypeScript and JavaScript as well. okay, so we can just leave the export there itself. And now going back to our app.ts, we just need to now use the import keyword, import like something from something. okay, so now I'm going to import something from the to do model file, okay, which is at the same level as this file. So we use the relative path to do model, and most importantly we need to add in the .js extension, because later TypeScript will be compiled to JavaScript, and this is the file which when we compile our browsers will look for. okay, so over there we just need to import the to do and then the to do status. Alright, so with that done, you see that we don't have any errors. And if we now recompile and go back to our browser and give this a refresh, you see that this breaks. okay, so since we also need to configure within our ts config, right, since we are currently using the AMD module and we need to switch that back to something modern, right? So this is not compatible to this approach. So we now need to go back to the ts config and change this module back to this time it is ES16 2015. okay, so we are basically using ES6 modules, which is supported by modern browsers and not older browsers. okay, and later I will also come to an approach where we can make even the older browsers support this syntax as well by using Webpack, okay, which I'll come to that later. So this is only supported for those modern browsers like Chrome, Firefox, Safari and all that. So like unlike Internet Explorer 9, which is an older browser, okay. So if you run this code over there, that might not work. And after this, we now need to comment out the out file, okay. So basically we don't take it more from the bundle.js but from the app.js, right? So let's comment this out. And now going back to our index.html, we now to replace bundle back to app. Okay, so we are doing this because we are using the import and export syntax within the app.js itself. Okay, and if I go back to my browser, we see another error saying cannot import statement outside a module. Okay, so since we are using ES modules, okay, so by default it is common.js, so we need to explicitly mention that we are using ES modules. So instead of this, we can just get rid of this differ, not anymore. So we can use the type and then set this to module. Okay, so with that saved, and now if we go back, our application is back to working. So let's test this and giving the title, description and number of hours. So that works. All right, and now if I just show you the one distinction between our older approach and this approach, if we go to the app.js, you see that we are using the import syntax over here. Okay, import and export, and everything is used within this one file. Okay, so this is our complete source of our application from the app.js, and of course import and export syntax are also available within JavaScript. Okay, make sure that we add in .js over here. Okay, because right now we are not using any Webpack bundler. Okay, so since that will automatically infer the default file types to be .js, so for now we manually need to add in .js since we are using the module type right over here, so and not the common.js, so that is why. So everything is working now. So with all the intricacies out of the way, we can now go ahead and organize our file. Okay, so we can just put in one particular function that does for this file in a separate component, and then we can use a import and export over there. Okay, just like we did for the to do model. So let us create another folder over here called components. So this will store all the components that are required for this app.ts. So components. Okay, and inside this I can just create a component to store the base component, right? So we had created the class, this abstract class, so we can create a file over there called base component .ts, and over here let us cut this piece of code and till here. We can go to this particular component, and before we import from our app.ts, we need to export this, right? So export abstract class and this particular component. So we can now go right at the top and we can import that, and make sure you use curly braces since we are using named export. So if you want to use default export, we can use the default keyword like export default abstract class, and we don't need to use curly braces. Okay, so we can just give this any name. So I'm just going to call this component and importing from the components folder and then the base component. Okay, so if I just save this and go back, you see that our application still works. Okay, so yeah, also I can name this anything. Since this is a default export, I can just name this anything. You can even put your name, and we need to use the same name wherever we are using it. Okay, so I can for now go the named export itself. So you see that it gives me an error saying that has no export member component. Okay, so this is a named export. So if you want to make that a named export, we can just get rid of this default. So this will become a named export. Okay, so let's export this auto bind decorator into its own file. So I'm going to create another file called as decorators, and inside that creating a file called autobind.ts, and before I paste it, let's put the export keyword and then export this particular function which acts as a decorator to our app.ts. Okay, so let's import that autobind decorator. So since this is a named export, I can use curly braces and autobind, and we can use a auto import from VS Code, and once we do that, we see that there are no more errors. Okay, so let's do the same for the validation lib. Okay, so this is an interface which will give the validation for our user input. So let's create another folder for, let's say, validation, or let's call it utils, short for utilities. Okay, so this is basically a design which we implement when you are creating any kind of application. So we organize each and every particular file, what it actually does, into its own folders, right? So if it is a component, we create a components folder and put it over there, and all of that functionality. Okay, so let's do the same for the utils called as validation.ts. So let's export this interface called validatable, and let's import this right at the top. Okay, so that's done. Now let's go through the to do state. So it's right here, so I can just cut this and create another folder for the state, and let's call this to do state. And just do the same. Okay, so we also need the listener, right? So the listener basically is the interface that we created only within this app.ts. So let's also export this as well, or we can just use it only within this file if we are only using it here. Otherwise we'll have to export this as well. So with that done, we can now import our state here. So import state from state slash to do state.js. Okay, so also let's export these interfaces for the drag and drop. So I'm going to create another folder over here for the models. Okay, and here let's create a drag and drop. Okay, and do the same export thing and for this as well. Okay, so let's import drag target and draggable. Alright, so that's done. So let us do some more complex importing stuff, where one particular component, where let's say we want to export this to-do list, right? So there we want to import some more things inside that. Okay, so that we use reusable components over there. Okay, so for that, let's export this to-do input, and I'm going to cut this, and inside this components folder, let's create the to-do input. Okay, so if you want, you can use camel casing or the dashes for separation. So anything, I must stick to any one. So let's go with the camel case. So let's paste in over here, and of course we need to export this, and here we are missing the components, right? So that is coming from the components folder, so the base component, right? So let us auto import that. So you can just do that by clicking control space. Okay, so that will go ahead and auto import. Okay, so let's do the same for the validatable as well, and also for this particular function called validate, we haven't even exported this. Okay, so let's export this function as well called validate, and going to the utils and creating, or we can just go into this validation.ts itself and we can export it over there, since both do the same job. So export function validate, and we can now use this within this file. So let's use the auto import, and yeah, what else is missing? So we need the auto bind decorator, right? So again we can auto import that as well, and the to do state as well. Okay, so I think we haven't exported the to do state, so let's go right here and cut this piece of code for the to do state, and let's go to the to do state itself over here. So one file can basically export multiple things or variables, right? So we can do the same over here as well. So export class to do state, and we need the to do type also, right? So we can just come back to this, and also let us export the singleton that we created using the to do state, and also let's export this. And we can use this to do state inside our to do input. Okay, so that's done. So let's us also fix the imports for this particular file that requires the to do status. So we can import the to do model itself over here, and also the to do status enum type. Alright, so that's done. And now what else is remaining? We just need to export this to do item class. So let's collapse this and cut this, and let's go to our components and create a to do item class. So to do item.ts, and let's paste it over there, and let's do the particular imports. Okay, and also export this. All right, so that's done, and what else is remaining? That is the to-do list itself. So let's collapse, cut this, and let's go to the components and create another one for the to-do list. Okay, export, and let's fix all the imports. Okay, so the to do state, the enum type, and the to do item class itself. Okay, so all we now need to do is import the to do input, which will actually display the form, and the two other boxes, right? One is for the in progress to do list and the finished one. Okay, so again, let's auto import from our component / to do input, and the same for the to do list as well. Okay, so that's done. Let us delete all these unused imports, and let's see if our app is still working. So one thing I forgot to do is to add in the .js extension, okay, for wherever we are importing. So over here, and let's do the same for the other files as well. So wherever we are importing stuff, so .js, and let's do the same for everything else. Okay, so let's do the same here as well. Okay, so here as well, and also for so this doesn't import anything, so yeah, and if we missed anything we can just come back to this. Okay, so with that done, we can now go ahead and test this out. So make sure you have recompiled your TSC compiler. Okay, so now if we go back, we see that our app is still working. Okay, so if I add in a title, description, and number of hours, so that works. Okay, so this is all about import and export when it comes to TypeScript or JavaScript basically. So we have solved the problem of having such a big file, and now we have more modularized code. Okay, so we have separated them into its own files and folders, so whatever they are doing, so that we can just go to any one of the particular file and make the changes, instead of just keeping scrolling around, and just becomes a very big mess, right? So I forgot to put the to do model inside this models folder, and VS Code is smart enough to update the imports as well. Okay, so we can just say yes, so that will update the imports wherever you have made the import to. Okay, so this is one nice feature within your code editor which you are using, that is VS Code. So I'm not sure about other editors, so this is the industry standard of using this code editor. Okay, so let us address the problem that we have currently, that is by making this app work on older browsers as well, such as Internet Explorer 9. So this currently is using ES 2015, okay, as I showed you over here. So we also need to make it work on older browsers as well. Okay, and if I also show you another problem, so if I just open my network tab and give this a refresh, let's put this all without any filters. So we see that this is making a lot many requests to our files, right? So these are all the files that we currently have, where we have segregated them into its own components, and the problem in this is downloading a lot of JavaScript files, okay, which is not ideal. So we need to optimize this particular problem. So I've just opened the waterfall graph, where you can just right click and go to header options and enable this waterfall option. Okay, so you see that over here it gives us the how much time it takes to make a particular request for our JavaScript file. Okay, and if we just hover on this time itself to just set up to make the request to our server, so that will only take some amount of time. Okay, so for every file it takes time, so that is why this is not the optimal way to download so many JavaScript files. So we need to minify this into one separate JavaScript file, like we can call that as bundle.js, which will bundle all of our JavaScript files, and then it will just make one request. Okay, so you see this graph here. So this is the time that to send a request, and waiting for the server response only takes so much time. You see in this green color chart, and to download the content it doesn't take much time. Okay, so that of course this everything constitutes to bad performance. So how do we bundle all of this into one JavaScript file? And this is one particular problem, right? And also another problem, that is not working in older browsers. So there is one particular solution for this, that is Webpack. Okay, so Webpack is a build tool which is usually compiles all of our code into one single file that is called as bundle.js, and this is a file which will be sent to a browser to download and display the content. And also it will minify our code. So whatever the code we have, so we have in fact if we have written a lot of code, let's say, okay, so this will go ahead and minify it, and it will make the particular bundle.js file a lot smaller, and also without any kind of errors. Okay, so that it will be easy to understand for browsers, and the download time will also be very fast. Okay, so this is a very small application, so we do not find any kind of performance issues. As we keep scaling this and bring in a lot of code, so that time we can face a lot of issues, like this app might become a little bit slow just because of the number of requests we make. And also we need to make it support to modern, not only to modern browsers but also to older browsers as well. Okay, and that will also impact SEO. Okay, so let us have a look at the Webpack tool. So this is the tool which we are going to use, and you can just check out its documentation, and it gives us a clear-cut instructions on how to use this within our development process. So if you just click on documentation, it gives you every single thing on how exactly you need to use it. So you can just explore this if you want. And anyways, I'll be going to install this Webpack within our project, and let's have a look how do we set up Webpack. So we already have npm initialized for this project, which is actually running the dev server. Okay, so basically the light server, which I have installed this as a dev dependency. So we can add in some more dependencies for this project. By the way, that's dev dependencies. So for that we can open our terminal, and we can open another terminal here, and we can install the following dependencies. Okay, and this I'm going to do this for the dev dependencies. Okay, so which means that this will only be for the development and not when we are into production. Okay, so the first thing which we want to install is the Webpack library itself. Okay, so this is the heart of the Webpack, and also we want to interact with Webpack, right? So we need to have a interface for that. So we install Webpack CLI, and then we install TypeScript. Okay, even though TypeScript is installed globally, so we want to specify the version that we are configured with this project, so that later we do not have any version conflicts, right? So this is optional, but it's always a good practice to also include the version of your TypeScript. And apart from this, we need the TS loader. So this is a library that is required by Webpack to compile our JavaScript or the TypeScript code into plain JavaScript. Okay, and apart from this, we need the Webpack dev server. Okay, so this will run our development server. So far we have been using the light server, so this will detect any kind of change, and that will update our code, right? So that we don't have to refresh every time. So this is the library which will do that. And yeah, I guess that is it. We can just go ahead and install these. So once we have installed all these, we need to create a specific file dedicated to Webpack, that is webpack.config.js. Okay, so make sure you have no typos in here. So this is the file where Webpack would specifically look inside your file. Okay, so here we just need to configure the settings for this particular app to run. Okay, so by specifying various things. So this is like your settings file. Okay, so we just need to export one particular object inside this Webpack config. So we can use the module.exports since we are in Node.js environment. So we have access to this where we can export this. So basically this is common JS syntax which we are using. So let us export an object. So we need to now specify the entry point within our application. So the entry point within our application is this app.ts, right? So which is actually makes the import like the to-do list and to-do input. So it will go into these files and resolve all these inputs and the imports, and then it will just form an hierarchy, right? So this is the entry point. So this is like the root of our file tree, and we just need to set that up. So where does that reside? We just need to put that within the entry option and point that to the relative path of /src/app.ts. okay, and the next property is for the output. All right, so output, make sure you have no typos in here, and output itself takes in another object where we need to specify the path name and the actual path to that particular destination. So let's give the file name to be bundle.js. okay, so this is a standard name. We can just name this anything you want. So usually it is named as bundle, so in any project you use, so bundle.js and not ts, because Webpack internally transforms this to JavaScript files, and we just need to specify the path where it has to collect this particular file that is coming from dist/bundle.js, right? So we need to now specify an absolute path, not the relative path. okay, so how do we get the absolute path? We have the built-in library from Node.js called as path, right, where we get the path where we are accessing this particular file. So let us go ahead and import that. So we can say path and set that to require, and we are going to import the path module. So this is a built-in module, so you don't need to install anything. So we can now say paths.resolve. okay, and we have the special syntax for the current directory, so that is underscore 2 times the name and then point into the dist folder. okay, so say dist, and this is the folder that we are pointing to over here. So the underscore dir name is the particular absolute path to this point in code over here where the Webpack is actually using this, and then this is same in the level as dist, right? So we just need to go into the dist folder. So this will be the place where it has to find this bundle.js. So I hope that's clear. And the next thing is we need to specify what are all the files that Webpack has to compile. okay, so we need to specify all those TypeScript files, right? So we create another property here called module. okay, and inside that this also takes in another object called rules, and inside that another object where we need to specify the test, okay, which is actually a regular expression. So we just need to add in a regular expression by adding 2 slashes, and in between those slashes we say \ts and then $sign. okay, which means that it has to look for all the .ts extension files. okay, and dollar represents to match the whole line. okay, so this is a regular expressions if you know about it. So, and we also need to use the library that is used for compilation from ts to JavaScript files. So that is the ts loader, right? So the package that we installed, so we need to use the ts-loader. okay, so we are prone to make any kind of spelling mistakes, so make sure you are typing the right values, and then we need to exclude the node modules. okay, otherwise it will go into node modules also and compile all those TypeScript files. So exclude node modules. all right, and also this needs to be a regular expression. okay, so that's done. Now we need to add in another property called resolve. okay, so what are all the files that need to be resolved, so which takes in another object and specify the extensions. okay, so this has to specify the extensions. okay, and give this in form of an array where it has to look for the .ts and .js files. And after this we need to also add in another property for debugging. okay, so since all of this code will be compiled into one single JavaScript file, so that will not be sufficient for debugging because we can't understand what is there inside that code. So we can just add another property called devtool and set this to true. okay, so which means that we are enabling debugging mode, so that we can go into the browser, the sources tab, and we can get the actual source code for this particular file. okay, instead of just that simple bundle.js, so that we can debug our app wherever we are going wrong. So this is of course a good developer experience. okay, and this is a particular setting which you need to enable. okay, so let's save this file, and one setting which we need to comment out from our tsconfig.json, that is where is that? So that is this out there. okay, so this will be handled by Webpack behind the scenes, so we don't need to do anything for that. And apart from this, we can also need to enable the source map to true, otherwise our debugger tool that we just set up, right, for the dev tool, so that will not be enabled. Okay, so we have everything else perfectly fine. Now we can go to the package.json and add in another script. Okay, so to basically compile all of our code. So since I commented out the out file, so it has compiled all of that over here, because I forgot to turn off this TypeScript watch mode. Okay, so anyways, I'll just go ahead and delete all these. So let's add in another script over here called as let's call this build, and just call the Webpack command. Okay, so once we do this, we can run npm run build and just test this out. Okay, so we get some errors here. Sorry, instead of setting this to true, I need to set this to a specific value. Okay, so you see that that this gives us a hint. So we need to specify inline, that is source, and then map. Okay, so inline source map. Okay, so with that saved, we can run the build command again. Okay, so one more error. Sorry, this rules should be an array of objects like this, and that's why it's complaining of here. Okay, so sorry for that. While talking and typing, I make such mistakes. So let's npm run build again, and yeah, so now our bundle.js has been generated. So if we go to the dist folder, you see now we have a bundle.js. Okay, so we see a lot of gibberish over here which we can't even understand, but this is the minified version of our particular code. Okay, so whatever so many files we have, right, which is we have written a lot of content over there, so this just compresses into bare minimum code. And the best part about this is using the syntax which is also supported by older browsers. Okay, so we are not using any kind of modern browser syntax, that is ES6. So this is the good thing, and we can now go to our index.html to pick up this bundle.js file again. Okay, so let us replace this app with bundle. Okay, so if I now save this and go to my browser to see the code, so we have the light server running as before. So let us go to our app, and if we now reload, so this works as before. Okay, so if I just type in a title, a description, and number of hours, click on add to do, so this works. Okay, so that's great. So let's open the network tab and give it a refresh. So now you see that it has only made request to one specific JavaScript file. Okay, so this is the file where we have all the code for to run this project. So we cannot understand anything from this response. So the good news is that we have the sources, right? So since we enabled the dev tools to be inline source map, we have the same structure as our development environment, and we can just debug this very easily. Okay, so if we go into the, like, let's say dist, so we have this bundle.js, and we also have this to do ts. Okay, where our entire source folder exists, and we have the exact same file structure as we had within our code editor, right? So we have the components, so the base component, and this is exactly the same code that we have written with the ES6 syntax. So it is easy to debug. If you want, we can also add in a breakpoint over here and then see the application state and just try to debug. So this is definitely a good development experience. So although I thought initially when we compile this into one JavaScript file that is in turn handled by Webpack, I thought we cannot debug. So thanks to this tool, that is DevTools, which we can enable this particular option. So the only thing left is we now need to use the Webpack dev server instead of the light server that we were been using thus far. So now we need to replace this light server with our Webpack dev server that we just installed, so that we are using the development server for Webpack specific and not just the light server. Okay, so let's replace this with the Webpack dev server command, and with that we can just run this command of npm start. So once we run that, we get some error saying that mode option has not been set within our Webpack config file. Okay, so we need to also set a mode whether we are running this in production or in development. Okay, so currently we are running in development, so let us put the mode and change this to development. Okay, we are no longer using all of these files, so we can just go ahead and delete all of this except the bundle.js, which was actually generated by Webpack. So once we delete this, so since we are in development, we also need to add in another property inside this output object, that is public path. Okay, and this is going to be the internal memory that Webpack uses for storing all of this files into it. Okay, so it will not access this bundle.js, so this will only be accessed once we are in production, but not in development. Okay, so we'll be creating another file later for the production version. So since we are in development, all of this will be stored in memory and not anywhere within our file system. So we can just leave that to / and Webpack will take care of it. And also to run the development server, so to detect any kind of change that we make within our files, so that should instantly reflect within our UI, right? So we just need to add in another property over here called as dev server. Okay, so this is going to take in an object, so it has a property called static, which itself is another object, and we need to specify the directory where the entry point of our application resides, so that is within the source directory, right? So that is app.js, so we can say directory and set that to path.resolve. So this will give us the absolute path, and we need to point it to the app.js which folder it is in. Okay, and underscore dir name and set that to source after that. And then we need to specify the port which it has to run. So by default it is 8080. If you want, you can configure that. So I'm also going to set that to 8080. So if you want a different port, you can also configure here. So once that's done, we can go to the index.html, and we just need to point it to just /bundle.js. Okay, so now that we have specified the public path to be /, so that is why we are using /bundle.js, which internally, as I told, in memory, Webpack stores our bundle.js inside that, and also by the file name that we have given over here called bundle.js. Okay, so with that saved, we can now go to our package.json and update our scripts over here. So we can add another script called dev webpack serve. Okay, so once we save this, and we can now run npm run dev. So once we run this, this is going to run webpack serve, and we can now visit our website and give this a refresh. Sorry, we just need to leave this to the relative path of this webpack config file, and later Webpack will internally use its memory to get the bundle.js file. Okay, so just a confusion there. So once I save this and give this I need to rebuild again or run the dev server again. So once I do that and give this a refresh, so our app is back to working. Okay, so now it is using the Webpack server, and now if I just open my console, so if I give in a title, description, and number of hours to complete, and click on add to do, so that works as expected. Okay, and let's say I want to make a change over here by, let's say, adding a console log here. Okay, so I just added a console log over here called object1, so just a simple one. So if I just give this a refresh, so you see that appears. So if I just try to update this, okay, and that will rebuild, and we get the updated console log. Okay, so just to test that it rebuilds for every change we make. Okay, so to build our app for production, we can create another file right within the root directory called webpack.config.prod.js. okay, so we can name this anything, by the way. So I'm just adding prod for production, and we can just use this as a starter code for our production webpack config file. And the first thing you might have guessed is to change this from development to production. Alright, and we don't need the dev server and the public path over here, so that's all just for the development, and we are just using this for production, right? So it is going to fetch the bundle.js from the dist folder, and that's the path that we have specified here. Okay, so that's all we need within this particular file. So we can go to the package.json and add in another command or or update this build script itself to use the production webpack config file. So we can just specify the --config and set the file name for that. Okay, so that is webpack.config.prod.js. okay, so once I save this and run npm run build, so now we can run the start script, which is going to start the production server. Even though it says like webpack dev server, so it is going to get access to this bundle.js and it is going to serve this, okay, to the browser, and it will run that particular code. So let's run npm start. Okay, so let's now go to port 8080 and give this a refresh. We see the same content, but now if we make any changes within our application, so that will not be reflected in here. Okay, so since this is only running the production version, okay, so this is going to give us an optimized code, okay, rather than just using this for development. Okay, and also it hides all the errors and stuff which are usually required for development to get to know where exactly that error is happening, but we do not want that to be in production. Okay, and give hints unnecessarily to hackers where exactly our particular error is and take control of our application. Okay, so that's why we create two different approaches for the production and development. Okay, so I hope that's clear. So this is the minified code which is used for production. Okay, and so this is all it for this particular section, okay, for the webpack. So everything is now well set up.